I'm Laura, a 33-year-old photographer from Eugene, Oregon. Once a dreamer capturing life's fleeting moments, now a mother shattered by loss. At my triplets' funeral, Ava, Liam, and Noah, the air was thick with grief, rain drumming outside like a requiem. I stood before their tiny caskets, drowning in accusations from my husband's family, orchestrated by my mother-in-law, Margaret, whose control masked a sinister truth. Then, my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, stepped forward, her small voice slicing through the silence, exposing a crime so heinous it turned whispers into gasps. What did she reveal that unraveled everything? How could a child see what I couldn't? Stick with me to uncover a story of betrayal and justice that'll grip your heart. Please subscribe, share where and when you're watching, and rate this story from 1 to 10 when it ends. I used to think I had it all figured out. Picture me in Eugene, Oregon, where the air smells of wet pine and the rain never stops whispering against the windows of my little photography studio. My life was a canvas I painted with care, a career snapping raw, honest moments through my lens, a husband, Michael, whose warm smile could melt the chill of an Oregon drizzle, and our 6-year-old daughter, Emma, whose bright eyes sparkled like sunlight cutting through the forest canopy. We were building something beautiful, a family, a future, a goddamn dream I thought was untouchable. But then Margaret, my mother-in-law, stormed in like a shadow creeping across a sunny day, and everything I cherished started to unravel. I'm telling you this now, years later, but it feels like I'm still standing in that moment, watching her dismantle my world with a smile. Margaret, a widow living alone in a creaky wooden house on the edge of town, didn't just visit, she invaded. It started right after Michael and I got married. I'd be in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for Emma's dinner, the radio humming some folk tune, when the doorbell would ring. There she'd be, unannounced, clutching a bag of overpriced, overly complex toys for Emma, puzzles with 100 pieces that a 6-year-old couldn't possibly solve. "Laura, dear," she'd say, her voice syrupy but her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Emma needs toys that challenge her mind, not those cheap plastic things you buy." I'd bite my tongue, the sting of her words burning hotter than the chili I was cooking. Michael, bless his heart, didn't see it. He'd grown up under Margaret's thumb, raised single-handedly after his father supposedly died when he was a kid. To him, her constant presence was love, not control. "Mom's just trying to help," he'd say, his hand resting on mine, his brown eyes pleading for peace. "She raised me alone, Laura. She knows what she's doing." But I felt it, the way her gaze lingered on me, judging every move, like I was a rookie employee screwing up her perfectly run company. My home wasn't mine anymore. It was her stage, and I was just a bit player. I tried to hold my ground. I'd spent years building my photography business, capturing weddings and family portraits in the misty Oregon light. Each click of the shutter a small victory. I loved teaching Emma to see the world through a lens, her tiny hands gripping my old Nikon, giggling as she framed a blurry shot of our dog. But Margaret had opinions on everything. "Laura, you let Emma run wild with that camera. She needs structure, not this artsy nonsense," she'd say. Her lips pursed as she handed Emma a workbook instead. I wanted to scream, "This is my daughter, my life!" But I didn't. I smiled, nodded, and let the resentment simmer, a slow boil I couldn't turn off. Then came the day I found out I was pregnant, with triplets. I sat in my studio, the late afternoon light spilling through the window, casting golden streaks across the photos pinned to my wall. My hand rested on my stomach, and I felt a rush of joy so fierce it made my chest ache. 3 babies, Ava, Liam, and Noah, though I didn't know their names yet. I imagined them toddling through the forests around Eugene, their laughter echoing under the pines. Michael was thrilled, his face lighting up as he hugged me, but his first call wasn't to our friends or my parents. It was to Margaret. She arrived within the hour, her heels clicking on our hardwood floor like a metronome. "Triplets. Oh, Laura, you'll need me now," she declared, her voice dripping with authority. "This is too much for you alone." I froze, my hand tightening around the mug of tea I held. The way she said it wasn't an offer, it was a command. I wanted to tell her I'd manage, that I'd been a damn good mother to Emma and would be to these babies too. But Michael's hopeful look stopped me. "She's just excited, Laura," he whispered later, as we lay in bed, the rain pattering outside. "Let her feel involved." Looking back, I see it so clearly now. Margaret wasn't just helping, she was staking her claim. She'd spent her life controlling Michael, molding him into the perfect son. And I was the outsider threatening her empire. My pregnancy, my babies, they were competition, a new center of Michael's world that she couldn't dominate. I didn't know it then, but that fear, that twisted need to be the only one who mattered, was already festering in her. It was the first crack in the life I thought was mine, and God help me, I didn't see how deep it would go. The moment I found out I was carrying triplets, I felt like the world had cracked open, spilling light into every corner of my soul. I was 33, sitting in my photography studio in Eugene, Oregon, the rain drumming softly against the windows, the air heavy with the scent of damp cedar. My hand rested on my belly, and I could almost see them, 3 tiny lives, my Ava, Liam, and Noah, though I didn't know their names yet. I imagined their giggles filling our home, their tiny hands clutching my camera as Emma did. But that joy, that pure, electric hope, was suffocated by Margaret, my mother-in-law, who turned my pregnancy into a battlefield where I was always one step from defeat. I wanted to savor this time, to feel every flutter in my womb like a secret between me and my babies. But Margaret descended like a storm cloud, her presence as relentless as the Oregon drizzle. She'd show up at our doorstep, her gray coat dripping wet, carrying stacks of articles printed from some shady corner of the internet. "Laura, triplet pregnancies are high risk," she'd say, her voice sharp with fake concern. "You need to stop working. You're risking their lives with all this running around." I'd stand in my kitchen, the counter cluttered with her unsolicited kale smoothies, my jaw tight. I loved my work, capturing the raw beauty of families under Eugene's misty skies. But she made it sound like a crime. I tried to set boundaries. "Margaret, I'm fine. My doctor says I'm healthy," I'd say, forcing a smile as I stirred a pot of soup, the steam curling around me like a shield. But she'd just purse her lips, her eyes narrowing like she was sizing me up for failure. She'd call Michael behind my back, her voice low and urgent, complaining that I was too stubborn to listen. "She's not taking this seriously, Michael," I overheard her once. The phone pressed to her ear as she stood in our living room, the rain-streaked windows casting shadows on her face. Michael, my Michael, would come home and gently nudge me. "Mom's just worried, Laura. She's been through this. Let her help." Help? It felt like she was strangling me, and he was handing her the rope. Her meddling got worse. One day she showed up with a gift, a set of silk baby pajamas, ridiculously expensive and utterly impractical for Oregon's damp chill. "For the triplets," she said, her smile tight, "so they'll look elegant." Elegant? They were babies, not goddamn runway models. I wanted to shove the box back at her, tell her to keep her fancy bullshit out of my kids' lives, but I didn't. I thanked her, my voice hollow, and stuffed the pajamas in a drawer. Each gift, each comment felt like a jab, a reminder that my choices weren't good enough. I'd lie awake at night, Michael snoring beside me, the rain tapping the roof, wondering if I was losing my mind, or if she really was trying to take over. The pressure wasn't just in her words. It was in the way she watched me, like a predator waiting for me to stumble. At a prenatal checkup, I sat in the sterile clinic, the ultrasound screen glowing with 3 tiny heartbeats, and I felt invincible. But when I shared the news with Margaret, hoping for a moment of shared joy, she frowned. "You need my doctor, Laura. Yours doesn't specialize in multiples." I wanted to scream, "I trust my doctor. not your friend who probably owes you a favor. But I bit my tongue, the weight of her judgment pressing down on me like a stone. Michael, as always, took her side. "She's just trying to keep you safe," he said. His hand on my shoulder, but it felt like betrayal. I started to feel like a stranger in my own life. I'd walk through Eugene's wet streets, my camera slung over my shoulder, trying to find solace in the fog-draped pines or the neon glow of downtown coffee shops. But even there, I couldn't escape her. She'd text me recipes, call with advice, or drop by with more of her damn smoothies. I was pregnant with 3 miracles, but she made me feel like a failure before I even got to hold them. I'd sit in my studio staring at my photos, families laughing, couples kissing, and wonder if I'd ever feel that free again. Suingam. Looking back, I see the venom in Margaret's eyes, the way she watched me like I was stealing something from her. She wasn't just helping. She was marking her territory, trying to prove I couldn't measure up. I think she was jealous that I was building a family with Michael, that my babies were pulling him away from her control. She wanted me to feel small, to doubt myself, so she could stay the queen of his world. I didn't know it then, but that jealousy was a seed, and it was already growing into something monstrous. The day Ava, Liam, and Noah were born, I felt like I'd touched the edge of a miracle. It was a damp October morning in Eugene, Oregon. The hospital room bathed in the pale gray light of a rainy dawn. At 32 weeks, my triplets came early, tiny as sparrows, their fragile bodies whisked away to the NICU's sterile glow. I lay in my hospital bed, exhausted but burning with love, picturing their little hands wrapped around my finger one day. But even that sacred moment was stolen from me by Margaret, my mother-in-law, who didn't just step into my life, she seized it, like a CEO claiming a company I'd built from scratch. I was still reeling from labor, my body aching, my heart tethered to the NICU where my babies fought to breathe. I wanted to be with them, to whisper their names through the incubator glass, but Margaret had other plans. Without asking, she moved into our house while I was still in the hospital. I came home to find my carefully curated nursery, my forest-themed haven with pine tree decals and stuffed bears, gutted. She'd replaced it with her own vision, a nautical nightmare of blue waves and stiff sailboat mobiles. "It's more practical for triplets," she said, her voice smooth as she stood in the doorway, hands clasped as she'd just closed a deal. Practical? It was my goddamn sanctuary, and she'd torn it apart. She didn't stop there. Margaret took over everything. I'd stumble into the living room, still wobbly from delivery, only to find her cradling Ava or Liam, showing me how to hold them properly. "Laura, you're too tense. You'll stress the babies," she'd say, her eyes glinting as she adjusted Noah's blanket with a flourish. I wanted to scream, "They're my children," but my throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I was their mother, yet she made me feel like an intern, bumbling through her perfectly orchestrated empire. She'd swoop in during feedings, insisting on her brand of formula because, "Your milk isn't enough, Laura." Every criticism was a knife, twisting deeper into my confidence. Michael, my husband, was no help. He'd come home from the bank, his tie loosened, and see Margaret burping Liam or rocking Ava. "Mom's a lifesaver," he'd say, kissing her cheek before mine. "We're lucky to have her." Lucky? I felt like I was drowning in her shadow. I'd sit in our kitchen, the rain tapping the windows like a mournful drum, staring at the formula cans she'd stocked in my pantry. Her brand, not mine. My choices, my motherhood were being erased, and Michael was too blind to see it. I'd clutch a mug of cold tea, my hands shaking, wondering if I was failing my babies before I even got to know them. Emma, my sweet 6-year-old, felt it too. She'd always been my light, her giggles filling our home like music. But with Margaret around, she grew quiet, clinging to me when she thought no one was watching. I'd find her in her room, her crayons scattered across the floor, drawing pictures of our family, minus Margaret. "Why is Grandma always here?" she'd whisper, her big eyes searching mine. I'd hug her tight, the scent of her strawberry shampoo grounding me, But I had no answers. I was losing my daughter's trust, my baby's first moments, and my own damn sanity. Margaret's control wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. She'd rearrange my kitchen, tossing out my spices because they're not fresh enough for the baby's environment. She'd lecture me on swaddling techniques in front of Michael, her voice dripping with authority, making me feel like a child who'd forgotten her lines. I'd stand in my nursery, surrounded by her sailboats, my chest tight with rage and grief. This was supposed to be my time, my chance to bond with Ava, Liam, and Noah, but she'd turned it into her stage. And I was just a prop. I tried to fight back, to hold on to something. I'd sneak into the nursery at night, the rain-soaked pines outside casting shadows on the walls, and whisper to my babies. "I'm your mom," I'd say, my voice breaking. "I'm here." But even those moments felt stolen, tainted by her presence. I was a mother of 4, but I felt like nothing, nobody. Suing Gam, looking back, I see Margaret's game for what it was. She didn't just want to help, she wanted to replace me. She saw me as an intruder in the world she'd built around Michael, and now, my children. My babies were a threat to her control, a new center of his universe that didn't revolve around her. I think she wanted to erase me, to make me invisible, so she could be the mother, the queen, the everything. I didn't know how far she'd go, but God, I wish I'd seen it sooner. I thought motherhood would be my triumph, but by the time Ava, Liam, and Noah were a few weeks old, I was sinking deeper into a fog of doubt and exhaustion. In our home in Eugene, Oregon, the rain fell in endless sheets, turning the world outside our windows into a blur of gray and green. The nursery, with Margaret's damn sailboat mobiles spinning lazily under the ceiling fan, felt like a prison. My triplets were miracles, but something was wrong, terribly wrong, and I was the only one who seemed to notice. It was like standing in a storm, screaming into the wind, while everyone else told me it was just a drizzle. I'd watch my babies, their tiny chests rising and falling in their cribs, and see things that made my heart clench. Ava, Liam, and Noah slept too much, way too much. Their eyes, when they opened, were glassy, unfocused, like they were drifting in a dream they couldn't wake from. They weren't gaining weight, despite the strict feeding schedule I clung to like a lifeline. I'd sit in the rocking chair, the creak of the wood blending with the rain's patter, pumping milk until my arms ached. But they weren't thriving. I'd read every baby book, scoured forums in the dim glow of my phone at 2 a.m., and nothing explained it. They were premature, sure, but this wasn't normal. My gut screamed it, but no one listened. I tried talking to Michael. One night, as we sat at the kitchen table, the air heavy with the scent of Margaret's overcooked casseroles, I poured it all out. "They're not okay, Michael. They're too sleepy, too weak. Something's off." My voice cracked, raw with worry. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. His banker's tie still knotted from a long day. "Laura, they're preemies. Mom says it's normal for them to sleep a lot. You're stressing yourself out." Margaret, hovering nearby, chimed in, her voice smooth as venom. "You're too sensitive, Laura. Motherhood's hard, but you can't panic over every little thing." I wanted to hurl my coffee mug at her smug face, but I just gripped it tighter, my knuckles white. Then came the moment that turned my worry into dread. I was tucking Emma into bed, her room a sanctuary of crayon drawings and stuffed animals, the rain tapping softly outside. She looked up at me, her big eyes wide, and whispered, "Mommy, Grandma puts sparkly powder in the baby's bottles. She says it makes them good." My blood froze. I knelt beside her, the carpet rough under my knees, and tried to keep my voice steady. "Sparkly powder? When, sweetheart?" Emma's voice was small but clear. "At night when you're asleep. She says it helps them not to cry." I hugged her tight, her strawberry shampoo grounding me as my mind raced. Sparkly powder? What the hell was that? I waited until Margaret was out, her car crunching down the gravel driveway, and crept into her room. My heart pounded like a drum as I rifled through her dresser, my hands shaking. Under a stack of scarves, I found it, a small unmarked vial filled with white powder. It wasn't baby formula or some bullshit nutritional supplement. It was something else, something sinister. I confronted Margaret the next day, holding the vial up in our living room, the rain casting shadows like bars across the walls. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice sharp. She didn't flinch. "It's just a dietary supplement, Laura," she said, her smile tight. "You're getting paranoid. Maybe you need a break from all this stress." Michael, standing behind her, nodded. "Laura, you're not yourself. Maybe it's postpartum. Mom's just helping." Helping? It felt like she was orchestrating my downfall. I started preparing the baby's bottles myself, standing in the kitchen at midnight, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, measuring formula with trembling hands. But exhaustion was a beast, clawing at me. Between night feedings, Emma's needs, and my own fraying nerves, I could barely keep my eyes open. I'd catch myself dozing off, the bottle slipping from my grip, and hate myself for it. I knew something was wrong. Damn it, I knew. But Michael's dismissal and Margaret's calm lies made me question my own mind. Was I crazy? Was I failing my babies? Suing Gom. Looking back, I see how Margaret played me. She wanted me to doubt myself, to feel like a shitty mother so she could stay the queen of our house. I think she believed that if I broke, if I failed, she'd be the one Michael and the kids turned to. She wasn't just controlling, she was tearing me apart to keep her throne. I didn't know what that powder was yet, but I should have trusted my gut. God, I should have fought harder. I'll never forget that morning, the way the silence screamed louder than any cry ever could. It was a cold, wet dawn in Eugene, Oregon. The kind where the rain doesn't fall so much as it hangs in the air, soaking everything in a gray despair. I woke with a jolt, my heart pounding before I even knew why. The house was too quiet. The usual hum of life, Emma's soft snores, the triplets' restless whimpers, gone. I stumbled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the icy hardwood, and ran to the nursery. The sailboat mobiles hung still, mocking me in the dim light, filtering through the rain-streaked blinds. Ava, Liam, and Noah lay in their cribs, motionless, their tiny faces pale as wax. My world shattered right there, and I'm still picking up the pieces as I tell you this. I dropped to my knees beside Ava's crib, my fingers trembling as I touched her cheek. Cold, too cold. Her lips were tinged blue, her chest still. "No, no, no," I whispered, my voice a broken thing, as I lifted her limp body and started CPR. My hands pressed against her fragile chest, counting compressions like a prayer, but she didn't stir. I moved to Liam, then Noah, my screams tearing through the house as I tried to breathe life back into them. "Margaret," I shrieked, my voice raw. "Call 911. Now!" My mother-in-law appeared in the doorway, her robe pristine, her face pale but eerily calm. "Laura, what did you do?" she asked, her voice low, accusatory, like I'd plunged a knife into my own children. What did I do? The question burned into me, a brand I'd carry forever. I ignored her, my focus on Noah's tiny chest, willing his heart to beat. Margaret stood frozen, not moving, not helping, until I screamed again. "Call for help, damn it!" She finally shuffled away, and I heard her voice on the phone, measured, like she was ordering takeout. The paramedics arrived, their boots tracking mud across my floor, their equipment clattering in a blur of flashing lights. They worked on my babies right there in the nursery, the room I dreamed would hold their laughter, now a stage for my worst nightmare. I pressed myself against the wall, Emma clinging to my leg, her small sobs cutting through me. I knew they were gone. I felt it in my bones the moment I touched them. But watching the paramedics exchange those resigned glances, hearing, "We're sorry, we did everything we could," broke something fundamental inside me. The police came next, their questions clinical, turning my home into a crime scene. "When did you last check on them?" an officer asked, his pen scratching against a notepad. "Last night, around 11, I said, my voice hollow, my eyes fixed on the sailboat decals Margaret had plastered on the walls. Margaret was supposed to take the night shift. She sat on the couch, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, her voice steady. I checked them at 2 a.m. They were fine, sleeping peacefully. Fine. My preemies, who needed feedings every 3 hours, shouldn't have been sleeping through the night. I wanted to grab her, shake her, demand answers, but grief held me like a vice. Margaret's whispers started soon after. She moved through the family, her words like poison dripping into their ears. Laura was so overwhelmed, I heard her tell Michael's aunt, her voice thick with fake pity. I tried to help, but she insisted on doing things her way. To his cousin, she murmured, she wasn't sleeping, barely eating. Who knows what state she was in? Their eyes turned on me, cold, suspicious, like I'd failed my babies, like I'd caused this. I stood in our living room, the rain pounding outside, Emma's hand in mine, and felt like a ghost in my own life. My children were gone, my husband was distant, and Margaret was painting me as the villain in a tragedy I couldn't comprehend. I was drowning in guilt and rage. Had I missed something? Was I too tired? Too weak? But deep down, my gut screamed that this wasn't Sid's, wasn't some cruel twist of fate. Margaret's calm, her accusation, the way she'd stood there while I begged for help, it wasn't right. I'd seen that vial of powder, heard Emma's words about sparkly powder. I wanted to believe I was wrong, but the truth was clawing at me, refusing to be ignored. Suing Gom. Looking back, I see how Margaret orchestrated it all. She wanted me blamed, wanted everyone to see me as the broken mother who couldn't cope. I think she needed me to fall so she could rise, to prove she was the one Michael and the kids needed. Her cruelty was a power play, but I didn't yet know how far she'd gone. God, if I'd trusted my instincts, maybe I could have saved them. The day of the funeral felt like a wound ripped open, raw and bleeding under the gray Oregon sky. Rain clung to Eugene like a shroud, mist curling around the pines outside the funeral home, where I stood before 3 tiny white caskets, each one holding a piece of my heart, Ava, Liam, and Noah. I was 33, but I felt ancient, my body hollowed out by grief, my hands trembling as I clutched Emma's small fingers. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had turned this sacred goodbye into her own twisted stage, and I was suffocating under her control. But then my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, did what I couldn't. She shattered the lies with a truth so sharp it cut through the room like a blade. I stood in the funeral home, the air heavy with the scent of lilies and damp wool coats, the low hum of mourners' whispers like static in my ears. Margaret had orchestrated every detail, red carnations spilling over the caskets, a glossy program with photos I hadn't chosen, a guest list swollen with Michael's relatives and her church friends. I wanted a quiet farewell, just us and my babies, but she'd made it a spectacle, greeting guests at the door like a goddamn event planner. Laura's too overwhelmed, I heard her murmur to Michael's aunt, her voice dripping with crocodile tears. I tried to help, but she was so stubborn. Their eyes flicked to me, cold and accusing, as if I'd failed my children, as if I'd caused their deaths. I felt like a ghost, drifting through the room in a black dress that hung loose on my frame, my reflection in the polished wood of the caskets, a stranger's face. Michael stayed close to Margaret, his face blank, his tie perfectly knotted, as if he could hide his pain behind her shadow. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see the poison in her words, but grief had chained my voice. I clung to Emma, her small hand my only anchor, her black velvet dress, another of Margaret's choices, making her look like a doll in a tragedy she shouldn't have to endure. Margaret's campaign against me was relentless. She moved through the crowd, her pearl earrings glinting under the dim lights, whispering to relatives. Laura wasn't sleeping, barely eating. Who knows what she did in that state? I overheard her tell the pastor. She insisted on doing everything herself, wouldn't let me help. Each word was a dagger, twisting deeper, painting me as the broken mother who'd let her babies die. I stood by the caskets, my fingers brushing the cold wood, whispering apologies to Ava, Liam, and Noah. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I let her in. The rain outside pounded like a heartbeat, matching the rage and guilt warring inside me. The service was about to begin, the pastor clearing his throat, when Emma slipped from my side. I barely noticed at first, my eyes fixed on the caskets, my mind drowning in memories of their tiny hands. Then I heard her voice, clear and piercing, cutting through the murmurs like a gunshot. "Pastor John," she called, tugging at his robe, her small figure silhouetted against the stained glass window. "Grandma put sparkly powder in the baby's bottles. She said it would make them sleep forever, so Mommy wouldn't be sad anymore." The room froze. The air sucked out as every eye turned to her, then to Margaret. Margaret, halfway to her seat, stopped dead, her face draining of color. "The child's confused," she stammered, her voice high and brittle, her hands clutching her purse like a shield. "She's just a little girl, making up stories." But Emma stood firm, her eyes blazing with a courage I didn't know she had. "I saw you, Grandma," she said, her voice steady. "You put it in their bottles at night. You told me it was a secret." The silence was deafening, the weight of her words crashing down like the rain outside. Michael's head snapped up, his eyes locking on his mother, confusion flickering into something darker. A man in a suit, Detective Harris, I later learned, stood from the back row, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Margaret, I'd like to speak with you outside." Margaret's eyes darted like a trapped animal's, but the detective was already moving toward her. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but resolute. "I found a vial of powder in her room," I said, the words spilling out. "The babies were too sleepy, not gaining weight." I told Michael, but he didn't believe me. The room buzzed with whispers, eyes shifting from Margaret to me, the tide turning for the first time. Suing Gom. I see now that Margaret's actions weren't just control. They were obsession. She saw my babies as threats, stealing Michael's devotion, pulling him away from her. She wanted me broken, blamed, so she could keep her throne. Emma's voice, so small yet so powerful, cracked open the truth I'd been too afraid to face. I didn't know what would come next, but in that moment I felt a spark of hope. My daughter had given me back my voice. The aftermath of that funeral felt like waking from a nightmare, only to find it was real. The rain in Eugene, Oregon kept falling, a relentless curtain over my grief, as I stood in the ruins of my life, my triplets, Ava, Liam, and Noah, gone, their tiny caskets etched in my mind like a scar. I was 33, but I felt like I'd lived 1,000 years. My heart hollowed out by loss and betrayal. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had orchestrated their deaths, and Emma, my brave 6-year-old, had blown her lies wide open. As I tell you this now, I'm still haunted by the truth that unfolded, but it's also the moment I found my strength, rising from the ashes of a family torn apart. The investigation moved fast after Emma's words shook the funeral home. Detective Harris didn't waste time. They searched Margaret's room, and there, hidden under her neatly folded scarves, was the vial of white powder I'd found. Prescription sedatives, strong enough to stop a grown man's heart, let alone 3 fragile preemies. The kitchen security camera, installed after a neighbor's break-in, became our salvation. I sat in a cold police station, the fluorescent lights buzzing like my frayed nerves, watching grainy footage of Margaret crushing pills into powder, mixing it into the triplets' bottles night after night. The final clip, from the night before they died, showed her adding a heaping dose, her face calm, almost satisfied, as she shook the bottles under the kitchen's dim glow. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream, to claw at the screen, to undo it all. Margaret's trial was a public gutting. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the rain outside tapping the windows like a mourner's drum. I sat in the witness box, my hands trembling, facing her for the first time since the funeral. She looked diminished, her pearl earrings gone, her prison jumpsuit stark against her pale skin. But her eyes held no remorse, just a cold calculation. The evidence was damning, the footage, the toxicology reports, confirming lethal sedative levels in my baby's systems, and Emma's testimony, recorded gently with a child psychologist to spare her the stand. The prosecutor showed how Margaret's doses escalated, how she hid her actions, and how she blamed me to cover her tracks. She'd claimed it was to help us, to calm the babies, but the truth was darker. On the 5th day, I read my victim impact statement, my voice shaking but unbroken. Ava loved to kick. Liam had the softest coos. Noah's eyes followed Emma's voice, I said, tears streaming down my face. You stole their lives, Margaret, and you stole my chance to be their mother. The jury took 4 hours to convict her, 3 counts of second-degree murder. She got 25 years to life, led away in cuffs, her final glance not at me, but at Michael, whispering, I did it for you. Michael broke that day. He sat across from me in our kitchen, the rain-soaked pines looming outside, his face crumpled like a child's. I should have listened, Laura. I failed you, failed them, he said, his voice raw. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. His pain mirrored mine. We divorced quietly. He moved away, unable to face the house where his mother killed our children. I took Emma to Portland, where the skies were clearer, the air less heavy with memories. I enrolled in a counseling psychology program, pouring my grief into learning how to help others. I founded Voices Heard, a nonprofit for families facing psychological abuse, and fought for Ava, Liam, and Noah's Law, ensuring children's accusations are taken seriously. Emma, my light, volunteered with me, her small hands stuffing envelopes, her courage a beacon. The trial revealed Margaret's truth, and it was uglier than I'd imagined. She had narcissistic personality disorder, treated years ago for obsessive control over Michael after his father didn't die, but left her, fed up with her manipulation. She'd lied to Michael his whole life, crafting a myth of widowhood to keep him tethered. To her, I was a thief, stealing her son. My babies were rivals, pulling him further away. She believed poisoning them would free me from motherhood's burden, restoring her as the center of Michael's world. It was sick, twisted, and it broke me to know someone could be so cruel. Suing Gam. As I look back, I see Margaret's obsession for what it was, a desperate grab for power, cloaked in love. She wanted me erased, my babies gone, so she could rule unchallenged. But Emma's voice, so small yet so fierce, shattered her lies. Losing Ava, Liam, and Noah is a pain I'll carry forever, but I've learned my worth isn't defined by others' betrayal. I'm stronger than I knew, and so are you. Trust your gut, fight for your truth, because even in the darkest moments, your voice can change everything. This story, my story, isn't just about loss. It's about finding strength in the wreckage, about trusting the smallest voices to speak the loudest truths. Have you ever had to fight to be heard when everyone else turned away? Share your thoughts below. I want to hear your stories, your struggles, your triumphs. Thank you for walking this painful path with me, for listening to my baby's legacy. I'm grateful for your time, your heart, and I hope you'll come back to share more moments that remind us we're never alone. Until then, keep fighting for your truth.